And I won't go through this, I'll just leave it so you can see it, but the single family home sales activity, we know, huge problem. I'll give you this quick thing to remind you. You can afford about 3 times your income for a home. So if you're making $100,000, you can afford about $300,000 in a house. You really shouldn't go above that because of insurance. Where I just got a shocker, I got dropped for my insurance, and Citizens is picking me up and has a really high price for it. So that just shows you how unaffordable it is. Rent, you should take no more than 1/3 of the income you have and spend that on rent. So that's a good rule of thumb to remember in housing. Next slide. And then it just goes through by rent submarket, but these numbers won't be accurate because they've gone up so much, and in certain areas they're so much higher. But I think y'all have a real opportunity as it is in some areas. You get Palm Beach Gardens, Jupiter, you're not going to get anything for less than $2,400 a month. So you guys do have a really bright spot in that you're a little bit closer to where workforce needs. Next slide. I'm just going to supply these to y'all and let you look at them, but it just talks about the supply and how things have changed. Next slide. Because I know those are very hard to see, especially online. Unless next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. I usually do this slower. I'm sorry for this. Well, I'll tell you, renter affordability by household incomes. Obviously, the lower income folks are, the harder they're going to have making household income payments. So, as I said, I'll let you go through that, and we have all this on our study in line. Okay, next slide. I hope I did 3 more of those transitions. And you can see the essential needing professional occupations. And I can give you a website to go and you can look up all the occupations, but that just shows you the occupations, and really only the higher ones have a chance of being able to find housing that is affordable or attainable in our community. Next slide. So obviously, we are not going to have economic competitiveness and quality of life if we don't do this. I tried to go to my favorite restaurant, Red Robin, for my birthday. The rrestaurant was closed because they didn't have enough staff. Right? They can't attract enough staff. It was a Monday. I mean, not a real popular day, but they couldn't even open for lunch. And the manager, who I know really well, tells me this happens all the time right now. Next slide. And we have to have a collective commitment. In Palm Beach County, a lot of people don't even know what municipalities are in, especially if they're just coming to look here. So we really have to deal with this as a county. We can't just say, oh, it's the county's responsibility for one or another. It's something we really have to work with together on. I've actually talked to people on the phone that didn't know what municipality they lived in. They thought they lived in Jupiter, like, no, you live in Palm Beach County, but it doesn't matter. You're getting all the benefits without the taxes. So next slide. And we really have to do a toolbox. I wish I had a silver bullet. We don't have one silver bullet, but we have to have so many different things to make sure that we have affordable housing. Next slide. And then we have to leverage long-term strategies with near-term opportunities. And that's something we're trying to do. Next slide. With a Palm Beach County housing plan. This is something we have our assessment. Now we're on to the next stage is we have to have a written plan. We have been trying to figure out this mess. It's like trying to drive to California without a roadmap. We may get there, but at the rate we're going, we're not going to get there anytime soon. So we're developing this roadmap. And next slide. And if you look in the different areas, we divided into 4 different areas. Financing, that's going to be huge. And I'll let out my secret because I think it's been in the paper. We're looking at the county to do a $200 million bond issue just to catch up. And that would primarily be gap financing. But we are that far behind with those couple thousand units a year that we're not doing with the 17,000 we're losing to appreciation. So those are the different things. We've had some fabulous speakers. Tim Weiss explained a lot of this to us from Pinnacle on one of the recent calls. Next strategy, next slide. Is planning regulatory. We need you because in this area, you can help figure out what you want by encouraging it, offering incentives. Next slide. Neighborhood revitalization, very important for this area. We have a lot of good housing, but I can tell you when we're trying to attract people to come to this area, they don't want a house that needs a lot of rehab, and honestly, they're not gonna be able to handle that. A first-time home buyer, a bank's not gonna lend on that in those cases. And that's just too much. It's hard enough to just close on a home and get through all that without having to worry about a lot of renovations. So very important in the different areas that we're going through in that. And finally, next slide. We're finally dealing with racial equity. I've been trying to get a plan for this through for years, but it finally got accepted, and we did get an assessment and a plan. So next slide. We need you involved. We do these meetings online the second Wednesday of every month from 9 until 10:30, and we would love to have you. This is where right now we are doing presentations on all those top areas I just showed you to educate folks. We have all of those recorded. They're Zoom meetings with mics so you can hear. And Leslie, who's also with the Housing Leadership Council, has done great meeting summaries. We just had a meeting the other day on racial equity. It was amazing. So please join us. Send me an email. Send it to info@HLCPBC. Next slide. And we would love to have you as part of that. We have to have you as part of this because we can't do this without the whole county joining in. So next on our discussion is Armando Fana from West Palm Beach. And I work with the city, and they've done some exciting incentives and other things that have really helped attract some housing to that area.
I will, sure.
And, oh, you're going to.
I'm gonna do it from here because I've been a little bit hoarse lately, so I'm gonna hopefully project a little better from here. And I got my presentation. Looking for it? That's all right. My name's Armando Fana, and I'm coming to you from our sister city to the north, West Palm Beach, that I've been serving now for the last 6.5 years. I'm currently assistant city administrator with the city. Prior to that, I was director for housing and community development. Prior to coming to the city of West Palm Beach, I was director for the Department of Housing and Urban Development's office in Miami, which covered South Florida. So the federal agency that deals with housing. So housing is near and dear to my heart, something I've been working on for a very long time during my career. And so I'm glad to be invited here to the city of Lake Worth Beach, and looking forward to hearing what great panelists here, by the way. I know all these folks, and they've been doing this for a long time as well. Still working on it. I can ad-lib here. But so the issue of housing is one that, as Suzanne mentioned, that really is, it's not a West Palm Beach issue, it's not a Lake Worth Beach issue. It really is a national issue at this point. You look at throughout the country, whether it's California coast, Florida, East Coast, even parts of Texas now, which Texas is unlimited land almost. The price of housing is just skyrocketing all over the country, and there's a lot of factors for that. In our region specifically, Suzanne mentioned COVID, but another factor related to COVID is the huge migration of capital from the Northeast and from other parts of the country into South Florida, into Palm Beach County, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. That influx of capital is buying up a lot of the available land, buying up a lot of existing properties and driving up costs. Of course, COVID has also caused shortages in materials and shipping issues with materials. So that's escalating costs. Labor costs are going up. So all this is really exacerbating a situation that was already pretty dire prior to COVID, and it's only gotten worse and worse. You can go to the next slide. So, a lot of times I hear folks say, why should government get involved in housing? Let the private sector do what the private sector does. And generally speaking, I'm a private sector guy. I think the private sector does a better job at government in just about everything. But when it comes to the housing sector, land is finite. It's not like you're building a table or a computer or a chair. And you can just build whatever the supply and demand is and cut down. Now, with housing, there's only so much land to go around. In the case of South Florida, a lot less than some other places. And so when you get to a point where your supply is not meeting the demand, which we have here right now, your prices escalate to a point where it's just unaffordable for a large segment of the population. And we saw this dramatically right before 2008, right before the housing crash, where housing prices were increasing way more than median incomes. And that was one of the things that precipitated the crash, along with a lot of bad financing that was going on. But certainly it got to a point where the median incomes just could not support the median housing cost. You know, we're at a pretty dangerous level now when you look at those gaps at this moment. I think the biggest difference between then and now is there's a lot more skin in the game. You know, the folks who are purchasing property, who are developing property, are doing so in a lot of cases with a lot of money put into the property. So I don't think we'll have that kind of a crash. But we're certainly getting to a point where I think that gap between median income and median housing prices is getting too large and dangerous. I already mentioned the market forces that are existing right now, so I won't go through that in too much detail. Access to capital. So, you know, why does government have to get involved in providing affordable housing or workforce housing? You know, because a lot of times the capital markets will not finance the projects when there's a gap between what the market would provide normally, the market rate housing, and what you're trying to provide for that's a little more affordable of a product. So if you're buying a building, if you want to buy a building or develop a new building, you're going to finance that. You're not taking that money out of your pocket. You're financing it. To get that financing, you've got to be able to show a certain return on the investment for either the bank or the investors in that project. And typically, there's a few different layers of how you get the funding for these projects. There may be banks, there may be investors involved, and it's several layers. When you talk about affordable housing or workforce housing, it could be 3, 4, 5 layers of different types of funding just to make it work. So access to capital is a big issue, even for developers like Jeff here, who want to do workforce housing, who want to do affordable housing. They can't access the capital to do it because they can't borrow that money. There needs to be a certain return. And so government sometimes has to fill that gap to be able to make the project work. Market limitations. This is another thing I tell government leaders all the time, the ones who come to me and say, well, why are we getting involved in housing? Because folks, let me tell you the unwritten rule here is that the market is not going to develop housing for low-income seniors. It's not going to develop housing for the disabled. It's not going to develop housing even for folks who are, as Suzanne said, if you're at 100% or below the area median income, which is, what was it, 67 what?
70,
oh, 70.
79.
No, median.
100%.
100%? Oh, yeah, you're right, yeah. 79,000, right, for a family of 3. If you're making less than that, the market's just not creating a whole lot of units for you right now because it's too expensive to build. It's too expensive to acquire land. It's too expensive to build. And so in order for the profit margin to be what it needs to be in order to get financing, they have to charge higher rents or higher housing costs. But the market is just not going to build it. So, you know, we have a segment of the population. By the way, you know, I talked about finite land. Housing is also a necessity, you know, just like food, water, shelter. These are basic necessities. So it's not like you can just say, well, you know, too bad. You can't afford it. You can't afford it. No, we have to house people who are not making a certain level of income, who are hardworking people, by the way, or who retired and on a fixed income. And so that's why, you know, in a nutshell, why there is a role for government, whether it be federal, state, or local, because the market, unfortunately, just can't produce it for every segment of our population, including working segment. You know, I think a lot of folks have this fallacy of affordable housing or workforce housing that they kind of go back to, I guess, the 60s and 70s and some of the stuff I saw when I was at HUD, the old Section 8 housing projects or public housing where we're just warehousing poverty. People weren't paying rent. Most of the newer affordable housing projects built in the last 20 years, people pay rent. They're working households. They pay rent. Might be lower rents than I pay or you pay, but they're paying rents in a lot of cases upwards of $1,000 a month. So that isn't, I wanted to give you that kind of overview of why government is involved. So let me just give you some examples of what the city of West Palm Beach has done recently. I'll give you some recent examples and what it takes in order to make some of the projects work. Georgian Gardens is a project that we just cut the ribbon on last year. And it is a senior affordable housing. This project only could work because of the low-income housing tax credit program, which comes out of the Department of Treasury and then flows to the state. It basically gives tax credits to investors to be able to then raise the capital needed for the equity to build these types of projects. Even with that, even though there's tax credits available to equity investors, the only way you can really make these projects work is with additional funding coming from local government, or in this case, it was federal money that came to the city that we then put to this project. So $607,500 in home money, that's HUD money that comes to the city of West Palm Beach. And then we also have incentives, and I'll talk about incentives at the end of the program. But 87 units of affordable housing for low-income seniors. They all pay rent, by the way. This is not free housing. They're all paying rent based on their income, and it's a beautiful project. I mean, any of you who have a mom, grandma, who's reached the age where they're retiring and maybe they're struggling with a fixed income, you come here, you'd be a proud place to have your parents. Dr. Alice Moore Apartments, I'm particularly proud of this one because when I talked about how the market doesn't provide housing for certain segments of the population. This particular project was created for households who have coming out of homelessness and have mental disabilities. Folks, in case you don't know, we have a mental health crisis in this country. And we have folks who have, there used to be back in the 70s and 80s, early 80s, there were institutions that we would put people in. We went away from that institutionalized serving of folks with mental illness. And we went from that to absolutely nothing. So now we have our prisons. That's basically where our people with severe mental illness go. Even people with moderate mental illness, they go to prisons because they can't function in society without support services. So this type of project provides housing for these folks who struggle with these issues, and also on-site support services. So if they need to see a counselor, they need to get mental health assistance, if they need to get prescriptions, there's somebody there who's going to get them those access to those types of services. What does this do? It keeps people out of prison. It keeps people stable. It keeps our society stable. But to get this project done, again, we needed to get low-income housing tax credits from the federal government, $1.1 million in city home money that we get from HUD, incentive funds, and I had to fight with the neighborhood for about a year and a half. Okay, this project was built. Nobody in the neighborhood that came out against it has ever come out to say this is a horrible project. On the contrary, it's 100 times better than people who saw it. It's 100 times better than what was there before, and because it's well managed and well maintained, it's a beautiful building, as you can see. Everybody just passes by and just thinks this is just a regular apartment complex. Nobody knows any difference. So next slide. Home at Tamarind, again, another project specifically for, it's a small one, 6 units, but still important, specifically for people with mental disability. This is a collaboration with the City of West Palm Beach, Gulfstream Goodwill, which is a nonprofit provider. The county also put some money into this. The city donated land, provided $250,000 in SHIP money. That's money that we get from the state, that the state legislature routinely sweeps every year. There's money that we're supposed to get every year. City of Lake Worth, I think you also are supposed to get SHIP money. No,
no, they're not entitled.
Oh, you're not entitled.
Yeah,
okay,
but they get part of the county money.
You're not entitled. But you do get it through the state, right? There's the state pot. Not entitled.
They're part of the county.
Part of the county.
Plus, you can get
It's big in the county for our money.
But I mean, that's probably based on, I don't know what the county's allocation is, but it gets swept every year. Luckily, thanks to Suzanne Cabrera and some other folks in the Florida Housing Coalition and others around the state, we've been able to secure at least a base amount, hopefully going forward. It's always a danger the state legislature to sweep it. But these little pots of money, it's not a whole lot of money, but look, with $250,000 and a donation of land, we created 6 beautiful housing. And Geo Homes, by the way, Geo Homes is a private developer. They donated a lot of their time on this. We created 6 housing units. But again, people with mental disabilities on site. There's an office on site, so there's somebody there all day long that provides support services. Married Place Estates, those are old pictures. We just actually cut the ribbon on one of the new houses. These are single family homes and townhomes, home ownership. And the program that Suzanne mentioned briefly, which was a county program where you have to build workforce housing. If you're doing a larger project in unincorporated Palm Beach County, you can transfer that requirement to a different location. As she mentioned, it could be transferred here to Lake Worth Beach. This is what happened here. The developer, in this case, it was Pulte, had a project actually in West Lake Worth area, not Lake Worth Beach, but unincorporated Lake Worth, moved their requirement to the city of West Palm Beach in a partnership with the city and the housing authority, and did, actually, that's not right. It's not 4 single family homes. It's actually like 30 single family homes and 12 townhomes. So it's pretty significant, especially for the neighborhood that it's in. Go ahead, next one. Brand, we have affiliated, represented here with Jeff Burns. So this is a future project. Jeff, I think I got the numbers wrong here. It's not 300, is it?
309.
309, I was close. I ran through it. 309 units, 190 of them, I believe, somewhere around there, that are reserved for people who are not low income. We're talking about moderate income households, because everything else I've shown you has been mostly reserved for lower income households. But we also have a problem with the market developing housing for folks who are making between 40 to 80,000 a year. Matter of fact, I think we did an analysis, and in the city of West Palm Beach, our employees, but I think we have like 1,400 employees, over 70% of them would actually qualify for to live here because of their salary. So this is a big time collaboration for us. Significant investment from the city, but again, the way to make this work with working with affiliated is to be able to make sure that you balance out the market rate units. So those market rate units help to pay for the cost of operating a project like this. And then those non-market rate units, ones that are a little bit lower rents, we need to fill that gap for them so that they can be able to afford maintain the project and running the project, but also get the financing, because they wouldn't be able to get the city didn't come in, the CRA didn't come in with $13 million in tax rebate, $1 million grant, a $1 million loan. They can't put the financing together, all right? So it's a big investment, but it's a big project, and it's also in an area literally a block away from downtown that's struggled for a very long time, called the Historic Northwest. So we're hoping this project not only provides more affordable rentals for individuals, but also provides a bridge between the downtown and historic Northwest, and gives people an opportunity to live right there in downtown, work in downtown. Our waiters, our police officers that are starting out, city staff, folks who are making that $50,000 to $80,000 range can live right there in downtown and walk to work, not have to get in the car to go everywhere they go. Next slide. Arts on Broadway. I put this up here. This has been a project that has been on the drawing boards for a very long time. I just had a discussion with the developers today, and I'm hopeful by the end of the month this project can close. This is I say thinking out of the box, I'm actually thinking in the box. These are shipping containers. So shipping container housing. It's been a huge challenge because nothing of this scale has been done. This is 51 units, I believe, 52 units. Nothing of this scale has been done that I know of in the entire country. Other parts of the world, there's been a lot of multifamily housing, large multifamily housing done with shipping containers, but I can't find anything in the country of this scale. The hard thing is, because it's something new, it's something different, it's hard to get the financing again. So we're this close, but the city's contributing land, $300,000 loan, there's some other incentives thrown in. And this will provide, again, similar to the Grand project, targeting not necessarily lower income, but targeting that kind of moderate income household that's also really struggling to be able to find affordable housing. Thanks. And that January 2001 completion, very optimistic. That was from like 2 years ago, I think. So some of the things the city does, other cities do as well, that maybe the Lakewood Beach can think about if you haven't already. Expedited permitting, that's something that we include. You know, it's not a huge deal, but time is money for developers, so whatever you can do to save them money helps. Density bonuses is something that we're working on right now. We actually just passed a first reading of an ordinance. We have to do 2 readings. We're going to tweak it a little bit. It's between now and the second reading, but it basically will allow for developers, if they want to get additional density beyond what's allowed in our code, then they can do so, but they have to provide us in exchange for that some workforce and affordable housing. In addition to just providing the density, we're also going to give them some tax rebate as well, because that's how much incentive you got to do on some of these projects, especially a high-rise in downtown West Palm Beach. It's just too expensive to build. You know, I mentioned how the scarcity of land. The only way to go is up, and the further up you go, the more expensive it is to build. So these projects are very complicated and very expensive. Water, wastewater connection fees. You know, it's something that's not that hard to do. You can do either a waiver. We do a waiver if it's affordable housing project, or you can reduce the fees. We reduce a whole number of fees: engineering fees, wastewater connection fees, parking regulations are relaxed for affordable housing, and then tax increment financing is something that the cities are also doing, where basically you're loaning the money up front and then to the developer, and then it's repaid with the tax increment that's created by the project itself. You know, you have a piece of land that's not producing a whole lot, you put something on it, and now it's now a tax producing property. You can leverage that tax revenue to borrow money to build a project like this. So that's a whole lot of information. I'm sorry I probably went way too long, but hopefully I gave you a little bit of an overview, and I'll stay after the meeting for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Next is Matthew Constantine from the Mayor's a big fan. He already said a little bit about it, but I'm a huge fan too. It's everything Adopt a Family's done. So with that, I give you Matt.
Thanks. Chris, you're good? Okay. Well, I first want to say it's really cool to be here. Many years ago, I served on the CRA board. I lived in the city of Lake Worth now for close to 20 years, the last 15 on North K. 3rd Avenue North, and I've worked in Adopt a Family for about 20 years, and our headquarters, for those of you who don't know, right on A Street, you know, right near Lake Worth High School. So a little bit about us. Our mission is to, you can go, Chris. I think of a cool way to send you a signal, but I think it's next slide. Our mission is to restore families in crisis to stability and self-sufficiency by providing all-encompassing services. And that's a huge mouthful. Christian, you do the next slide. But what we really do is we provide support for families who are either experiencing homelessness or families who are at risk of becoming homeless. You know, one of the cool things that I think that we've always prided ourselves in is it's not just housing. I mean, that's sort of our core philosophy, our core concept, and our number one support service. But we also provide case management and a lot of support services for all the families that are residents in our programs. Next slide. So a quick overview about what we do. We work at the Senator Phil Lewis Center. That's on 45th Street. That's sort of Palm Beach County's front door for homelessness. So if you're single or you're a family, that's where you start. And we work on the family side with that. We also operate an emergency shelter in West Palm Beach, 19 units, one of the only family shelters in Palm Beach County with a population of about 1.4 million and a huge problem with family homelessness. We have 112 units of affordable housing that we own and operate, and all of them are located within the city of Lake Worth. And you know, they're kind of scattered around, but we also have sort of a really important program that, you know, especially in the last year and a half, we have a homeless prevention program. So, you know, we're talking about affordable housing, and on the other end of that are the calls, right? And there are thousands of calls, and I'll get to that in the next slide. But every day, our phone rings off the hook with families from Lake Worth, from all over the county, who have come home to a 3-day notice, who are being evicted. And although there's this moratorium that's going to end July 31st, actions are still happening, and COVID is just one symptom, but I can tell you, for 15 years I worked there, 20 years I worked prior to COVID, that phone still rang. So housing affordability, the homeless prevention services in our community are vital. They keep a lot of families housed. And the connection between affordable housing and homelessness doesn't get clear. Because when we follow families that aren't able to access homeless prevention services, they end up calling that Senator Lewis Center. number. So it's really important as a community to work as hard as we can on homeless prevention. One last thing too, our housing is sort of campus-like. We have different housing programs for different income levels. So it's sort of a mix. We have families who are working the city, getting ready to purchase their own home. We also have families living with mental health issues who are, we're working to get back on their feet, and they all have their children. And we have, on any given night, we're serving 320 families. In Lakewood, we have on the first floor, I think one of the most innovative after-school programs, summer camps, in the entire town. It's called Project Row. It has up to 60 kids, and it is customized to really meet the needs of those kids that have experienced homelessness, that have had to move 15 times, that have had to hear and see things that no child should have to hear or see. And the program is expensive, but thankfully we have a lot of funders that support that with 3 different classrooms. We have AmeriCorps support services that there as well. We do literacy. We have mental health counselors there. We do groups with the kids. We don't often talk about, we're talking about housing development, but I don't think we talk enough about the impact of when it's not there. And there's a significant impact. Each time a child moves, their test scores, when it's a forced move, their test scores start to go down. Chronic absenteeism, the #1 thing as an indicator for school, school problems for our kids is directly linked to housing instability. So everything that we do, we try to take that all into mind. We want to keep the family stably housed. Okay, next slide. And so this is just some data. So you're hearing from the experts, by the way. These guys are sort of everyone up here is really, this is their thing. But what I can bring is like our little nonprofit, right? Like what we see at a downtown family. So in the last year, we've had close to 10,000 calls. And this is a fiscal year. So this is July 1 to June 30. So this is all COVID, during that period. But these numbers are consistent. This isn't, we didn't see a huge, tremendous spike with COVID. In fact, probably because of the moratorium and some other funding that came to the community. We received 10,000 calls, about half of them families who are calling us because they are literally homeless. The other half families who are at risk of becoming homeless and seeking prevention. And one thing I thought was interesting is, and we're going to get into it, but very, dominant in our statistics is the population we serve is below 50% of AMI. You do the next slide. And so like this stuff here, and I know we need to have these definitions, but it drives like me crazy personally. It's one of these things, and Suzanne and Armando, everyone said it. What we need is housing all over, right? We do need housing for someone making $75,000, $80,000 a year. We need housing for someone making $35,000 a year. But I think there's a tendency for, especially the families we serve, that they think you get lost in those. And by the way, that's probably like a third of the definitions that are out there for affordable housing. So an adopted family, and it's not just us, but everywhere, and I know the members here in this panel also use this. So we've started to talk more and more about truly affordable housing. And truly affordable housing for us is really, it's just that. It's a house where someone can afford to live. It's not based on, this percentage tweaked to that percentage to, it's somewhere someone can live. And so for a lot of families, you know what, that is going to be $500 a month. That's going to be $700 a month. And we're going to look at a case example. I wanted to kind of bring this home with and talk about a family that we're serving right now. I'm going to do my best to try to keep this as anonymous as possible. But it's a single mom with 2 kids who works for one of the largest employers in Palm Beach County. And her monthly income, she's making $34,000. Any glasses, can't see that. And her monthly net income is $2,600. So you start to take the deductions out, right? And none of these deductions are extraordinary. I mean, they're all within anyone's. I think everyone here has probably paid some health insurance, accident, disability, life insurance, auto insurance, a car payment of $323, which is really reasonable. And by the way, she's worked here at this place for 12 years, had been promoted numerous times. You go to the next slide. Okay, and then a cell phone of 47, utilities, groceries, and then we put in those line items in the rent. So if you take the fair market rent for a 3-bedroom, she's left with a negative, was that 760? I'm sorry,
747.
Yeah, and then the 2-bedroom. And none of this takes into account, by the way, any spending on getting gas, changing the tires, getting oil in the car, having a copay at a doctor's visit. It really does, when someone asks about the problem of affordable housing, it's really as simple as a calculator. And you know, you heard about the 30% of income. Well, 30% of gross income formula for someone making $2,000 a month is different from the 30% income for someone making $100,000 a month. And so we have to take this, I think, into consideration. I think some of these formulas, you know, they're kind of outdated. And we have to look at what is truly affordable for the families in our community, for everyone in our community. Next slide. So this is at Adopt Family. We have this program, Service Rich Housing. Actually, it's a program that we partner with Cindy quite a bit with. It's a program where we take families who are working full-time, doing really well. We work on their credit. We help them save money while they're with us. They're paying us a base rent of $550 a month. And in this case, she's actually able to save for the first time in her life. And prior to coming to us, her and her 2 kids were in a 1-bedroom apartment and was asked to leave because they had an opportunity to crank up the lease another $200 or $300 a month. And we heard some numbers earlier in Lake Worth. You guys all live there. I live there. So North J Street, I looked, there's like a 2-bedroom for $2,100 a month. South K Street, I looked, there's a 2-bedroom for $1,800 a month. So when I heard $1,500, I don't think, and I think John could chime in on this, I don't think there's not
Plenty of 1-bedroom for 1,500.
Yeah, I mean, in the city of Lake Worth Beach, we're up there. We're really up there. I think the data's a little bit behind on that. Next slide. So one of the things too that we strongly believe in is connecting supportive services with our housing. We don't just provide housing, we provide case management. We meet and talk with our families regularly. We provide our after school program, our summer camp, case management. We provide mental health services to the families. Armando's right, we are in the midst of a crisis. And what this does to someone who's unstably housed, add everything that you have going on, add job instability, add having 2 kids in virtual school, and then add a 3-day notice on your front door. And tell me how that feels, right? And so a lot of the folks that we've been working with are in need of someone to talk to, someone to be able to process everything that's going on. So that's a big service that we provide. And we also try to partner with as many of our community partners, because we can't do it all. We're totally that sort of starfish story, right? But that one made a difference. And that our mission isn't to solve this for Palm Beach County. But our mission is to make a difference for those families that we're serving. So we have awesome partners that are up on the stage here. And we partner with Habitat for Humanity. We partner with the housing authorities. We partner with everyone to try to get this job done. Next slide. So this is just some shots of our housing. And I just wanted to close with, one of the things that I mentioned it earlier, but we really do as an agency view housing as the #1 supportive service. Early on when we were founded, 1983, in the 90s, we did a lot of work with case management, parenting classes for the kids, trying to lift the parents, into a better place with job training, things like that. And it became apparent really quick that all of this was useless if they didn't have a stable place to call. And so then we kind of got into the housing business. So one of our first properties, right off of Bay Street was our first in the 90s. And we know that it works and we believe in it. And if you look at the social determinants of health, you see these items like, medical, their community, their faith, their religion. These different important pillars in everyone's life that's in there. And the most important one in there is housing. You don't have that house where it is, you don't have regular medical. You don't have a faith-based community that maybe you would rely on. You don't have a school that you're staying in and that you're stable in. You don't have the community. So we really strongly believe in doing this. And our most recent and last project is the lower right one. It's called Julian Place. It's 14 units of housing and a community center to provide services to middle school and high school kids. But it's a partnership with Highland Elementary. Highland Elementary is right on Bay, and has one of the top 5 counts of homeless students in the entire school district. And we've partnered with their staff and their principal to accept families referred from the school to us. So we get them, they can stop moving around, they can start having a place to do homework, we can start tracking attendance, and we can hopefully get these kids into a place where maybe they'll get accepted into the engineering program at Lake Worth Middle or a choice or, just take off. So that's it, I think. I just want to say thanks. It's good to be here. Thank you.
And next up is Cindy LaForce Bloom, with the Community Land Trust of Palm Beach County. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Okay, I always forget if it goes in the beginning or the end. And Cindy's program is amazing. And I always have to brag that I was on the committee that hired Cindy. So she's like a special, I knew like she was the person, but very unique idea in something we really need more of in Palm Beach County. It is the stepping stone from renting to owning. So I'll let Cindy take it away.
Good evening. I have some hard acts to follow, but I'll do my best. So like Suzanne mentioned, I'm here to talk about a unique approach to affordable housing, and that's community land trust. And then I'll touch on ADUs at the end of the presentation. If we could go to the next slide. As we all know by now, if we didn't when we came here, we do have a crisis in affordability. And that really is directly related to the ever-increasing gap between what our residents can afford, particularly the low and mod, but really the majority, overwhelming majority, and what houses are selling for in Palm Beach County. I mean, as Suzanne mentioned, and I was going to mention from her report, that back in January 2001, when the median sale price was $425,000, 87% of the households couldn't afford it. And now in June, that's up to $475,000, approaching $500,000. So we have a serious crisis in affordable housing. Next slide, please. Typically, the way local government programs address that is with purchase assistance mortgages. So they provide a gap in between what the house costs and what the buyer can afford, and they'll put a deed restriction on it that requires it to be affordable over a certain period of time. Usually it's 15, 30 years. So with that program, if someone sells the house during that time to a non-eligible buyer, they pay it back. And the thought is, well, it's going to be there for the next buyer. And then also there are some challenges with that type of model. And really it's because incomes don't tend to keep up with the price of housing over time. So even if they pay that money back, it's not enough for the next buyer. We call that the ever-increasing multitude. And then also, if that buyer decides to sit out that 15-year affordability period, they just got a windfall. But unfortunately, that public investment only benefited that one family. So rather than do that model, ours is based on subsidy retention. So a one-time investment into this home to make it affordable keeps it affordable over time. And the way that's done is there's resale restrictions involved with this model that tell you who the home can be sold for forever and for a predetermined price that ensures it's affordable. Next slide, please. Okay, community land trusts, how do they work? So the land is owned in perpetuity by the nonprofit organization on behalf, someplace in the country, it's actually a municipality, but generally it's a nonprofit that's held in perpetuity for the benefit of the community. And then the improvements and the house are purchased by an income eligible buyer. What ties it all together is a 99-year renewable ground lease. And what that ground lease ensures is that the home buyer gets exclusive use of that land. So they can mortgage it, and landscaping, it really feels like a traditional home. But also, even more key is that it has resale restrictions that say it can only be resold for another income eligible buyer, which means income restricted buyer, for a predetermined affordable price. If you can go to the next slide, please. I'm just making my way through this. And we call this the pay it forward model. So in exchange for buying a home that's below market value, you agree to sell to the next person for below market value and give up some of your equity. So I wanted to provide an example, and really it's because when we talk about this model, people say, okay, from a public policy perspective, it's great. Is it really fair to the buyer? So I just wanted to give you an idea of what this looks like. With community land trust, we typically have like 4 types of resale formulas, and we typically do a appraisal-based formula. But most recently, we were hired by the city of Port St. Lucie to administer their affordable housing program, and they wanted to sell everything under a land trust model because they lost a lot of their NSP money by doing that second purchase mortgage. So they picked a fixed rate formula, and they chose 1.25%. What that means is provided the unit appraises when it's going to be sold by the homeowner, they'll get 1.25 of an increasing value every year. So typically, if you're going to pick a fixed rate formula, that can be between a 1% and 3% return for the homeowner, but here they went with 1.25. So in this example, in this year, the home appraised at $220,000. We projected it out to say, okay, what's that price going to be in 10 years when that buyer wants to sell? We used historical market data to come up with this value, and it looks like it'll be $440,000. So that $220,000 house is now valued in the market at $440,000. And I'm going to pull. I can't see the slides. I'm going to pull up the sheet. You can digest some of the numbers. Okay, so the buyer, even though it was valued at $220,000, we had to target it. What's the affordable price in this market for an 80% buyer? And in Port St. Lucie, that number is $130,500. So we did get a subsidy to cover the difference. They want to sell it in 10 years, so they get 1.25% of increase in value each year over 10 years. So really that simple interest is just 12.5%. So the resale price to the next income eligible buyer is $146,800. So instead of that house going on the market for $440,000 and just paying back that initial subsidy, it's actually going on the market for another income restricted buyer for that amount. Now, what does the buyer get? Because that's also the question. It's a balance of interest. So the buyer in this scenario, we know that they're going to have closing costs, but they're not going to have a realtor because we find the next buyer for them. It's going to be $3,000. And they owe $101,000 on that mortgage they got. So they're going to be walking away with $42,760. So that's a fair return for an individual that normally would have been rented and have no equity. So it's even enough to put down a deposit on a market rate house if they're able to at that time and there's units available. Next slide, please. So the different ways to partner with the CLT is you could donate land or surplus properties. I have this rendering up here because this is exciting. We have worked in Lake Worth before. We did La Jolla Villages on 6th Avenue F Street. And now the Lake Worth CRA has donated a lot to us on F Street, and we'll be building this cottage home. We're going to be breaking ground like within a month. So also you can donate taxes sheeted properties, provide development subsidy. And the reason that's key is that right now we've discussed housing costs are so expensive. To develop housing is so expensive right now in Palm Beach County. Taking out the land is just not enough to make it affordable to that income that you're trying to target. And then also, as we mentioned, Lake Worth CRA is not the ship and tunnel jurisdiction, but if you get to that point, we do encourage that in your LHAP, which is the plan how you're going to spend your money, that you include the CLT purchase assistance strategy that's put out by the Florida Housing Coalition. And very shortly, they'll be putting out a CLT development strategy because it's a little bit different. You want to make sure that investment stays with the unit and not with the buyer of that home. Next slide, please. I just want to provide some real quick examples of some of the projects that we've done. And this is the CLT Kirk Road Homes project. And the county donated to us some lots that were going to be road right away that they realized they were never going to use. So we developed 6 single family and a duplex. They're all income restricted to 80% and below of the AMI. And then also, we got a federal home development subsidy. Armando had mentioned that's a federal program from HUD that's been passed through. In this case, it's passed through the county. But these units are actually located within the village of Palm Springs. Next slide, please. Another project we did was Davis Lanes West. We're actually headquartered in unincorporated Lakewood off of Malaluca on Davis Road. And over there, we developed a 24-unit subdivision, 16 single family and 8 townhomes. And most of the homes, 22, are set aside for 80% of the area median income, and 2 are at a higher income where you can make like $80,000, $90,000 and still afford it. As Matt mentioned, it's exciting that in both of these projects, I believe, we've had homeowners come out of match program. So they went from like homeless to homeowner. So it's really, really cool. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to transition because I was asked, and so I obey. We also have a rental housing crisis. As Suzanne mentioned, in her study found that there's about 99,000 households, 99,000 households that are cost burden. They're paying more than 30% of their income in rent, and half of those are paying more than 50% of their income in rent. So we need to look at ways that we can bring more affordable rental housing. And, you know, this ADU seems to be kind of the low-hanging fruit because we can really tap into the existing single-family home inventory and produce these units. So what is an ADU? It's really an ancillary or a separate living quarter that has a sleeping area, a kitchen, and a bathroom. And it's either attached to it's either within the existing structure or it's located on the lot as the primary residence. And you can see from the graphic that this can be done different ways. You can have one that's detached, you can have one that's attached, you can have one that's above the garage. Probably not in Florida, but you can have one that's in a basement. And then also a converted garage, we see that one a lot, and then one on a second story. Next slide, please. So the Florida statute recognizes the critical part that these ADUs play in solving the affordable housing crisis. They actually encourage that municipalities will allow ADUs. Some allow it, and I think Lake Worth has it in your multifamily zoning, but they also encourage it to be in your residential zone. That's where you can really tap into the existing infrastructure of the single family homes. The land's already there, the infrastructure's already there. But you know, not everyone was aware of this, but there was a change in 2020 that went on to say that when they're pulling a permit to construct the ADU, the person has to actually affirm that they're going to rent it for an affordable price to an income eligible buyer. So that was a newer change. And Palm Beach County is actually looking at their ordinance to see how that fits into there. Next slide, please. Okay, benefits of ADUs are many. They provide an alternative for affordable housing by tapping into single family homes. So what I say when I mean that, you're not going to have additional land costs. The land's already there and the infrastructure is already there. So it's an more affordable way to provide the housing. It's a great option for seniors. The AARP has partnered with the American Planning Association to come up with a model ordinance because they see it as a critical way to addressing the needs of senior housing. That allows the lower paid workforce to live closer to work, and that really helps ease the transportation burden that we have where people have to commute far to their work. It adds more density next to downtown, which really support the downtown businesses in Lake Worth. It provides a financial benefit to the primary homeowner. And what that means is they're getting income from renting out that unit, which is going to subsidize their mortgage and allow more income to be reinvested in the local community. The last thing I want to say on this is that there's been a lot of concerns that if you add ADU, you're really bringing short-term rental housing, and people are concerned with that because it's a single-family primary residence neighborhood. Florida Housing Coalition recommends that you put a deed restriction on the ADU that says it's long-term leases only, which means 12 months or more. But if you do that, you really need to provide a benefit, like either some kind of fee waiver or some benefit that you're providing to the person building it. In exchange, you're putting that deed restriction to ensure that it's not a short-term rental. If you could go next slide, I'm almost done. Okay, so I just wanted to provide a sampling of some local municipalities that do have ADUs in some form. They all have it for residential, but not all for any type of residential. I think Juno Beach, is one that does it for any type of residential. But, you know, I think that's really where I wanted to touch on the ADUs. So I'm going to step aside now, but if you have any questions later, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great job, Cindy. And now we have Tim Weed, who helps us solve, I say housing can be just a big math problem. And Tim is one of the people that helps us solve that big math problem.
Okay.
We can all use that.
No. By the way,
Okay.
does anyone mind if I sort of stand here? Screen?
Okay.
The next.
Good evening. My name is Tim Week, and a little bit of background about myself. I'm a native, born in West Palm Beach. Have fond memories of Lake Worth, as I spent as my early teenage years driving down Federal Highway, where I worked at radio station WPR, right across the bridge, right over here. I guess now there's some townhouses or development here. And, you know, I'm familiar with the community, and I think Lake Worth has exciting things are in its future, and exciting things are happening. And so it's an honor to be here, and thank you, commissioners and members of the community, to let me have a chance to address you. I started my career in the public sector, and then I moved into the nonprofit sector, and then I've been in the private sector with my current group of partners at Pinnacle for 19 years. And I guess I sort of represent what you would call a production builder developer of affordable housing. And this has been my life's passion and my life's work. And I'm also president of the Community Land Trust. But as you can tell from Cindy's presentation, she carries all the water, and I just say meeting adjourned, meeting continued. Cindy knows exactly what we're doing. A little bit about Pinnacle and about affordable housing development, sort of modern paradigm that I think Armando did a great job of kind of catching up on. You saw on the initial slide, yeah, if you could go back, we do all kinds of development. These are all affordable housing developments. The one in the lower left, you might be familiar with if you drive over to Palm Beach Lakes and go to the outlet mall, or right on the east side of I-95, called Pinnacle Palms, and that's a seniors community that we built in the mid-2000s. And we do the gamut of development from up left, that's a 23-story high-rise on Brickell. That's both affordable and mixed income. We have market rate development in there, a 3-story development in Sunrise, another of our sort of mixed income, mixed use developments in downtown Fort Lauderdale called Pinnacle Tarpon River. And then to the far right is Pinnacle at Peacefield in Hollywood, which we finished in the last year. It was one of the first public-private partnerships for affordable senior housing since the public-private partnership legislation was adopted, was put together, and finished in the last year. And it's named Peacefield because all the streets, just like in Lake Worth, you have all the streets named after colleges. And it's cool to have Fordham University. And I always wanted to, funny how things don't work out in life. But all of the streets are named after presidents in Hollywood. And this is on Adams Street. So John Adams' ancestral home is called Peacefield. So we opted to kind of grab that history and character of developments. And we've done that a lot. And I'm not speaking just for Pinnacle. I'm not here to do a free paid advertisement for our company, but all of us production developers in the affordable housing industry, we do work very hard to try to integrate our developments into the community, make them at scale and size and theme appropriate. Our hook on that is using art in public places, trying to weave our developments in the history of a community. Now we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to cover I'm going to fill in a few gaps from Armando's presentation about the primary financing vehicle for production multifamily affordable housing development, which is the primary vehicle is what's called the low income. If you hear me use an acronym, stop me, because we in our industry love our acronyms. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try to be very specific about the low income housing tax credit. It's a very competitive process where once a year, developments from all around the state apply to the Florida Housing Finance Corporation to get these allocations of tax credits for developments. And we use these tax credits to raise equity. And that equity covers 65 to 85% of the cost of development. And in exchange for that, we agree to keep developments affordable for 50 years at income levels at an average of 60% of the area median income or less. So you probably saw in Suzanne's data that for a family of 4 is in about $47,000, $48,000. So as Armando's pointed out, the people that live in our developments are paying rent. They are working families and seniors on fixed incomes. And this low income housing tax credit is this vehicle by which we make this possible. It's a very competitive process. And the allocation, that $57.5 million, that leverages $500 million of investment. But it's a drop in the bucket compared to just the county's need the city of Lake Worth Beach is the end of the state. And that number is actually going down because there was a temporary increase of about 12% under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017. So I believe that number has gone down to the low 50s. I don't have the data for Lake Worth Beach, but the 9% low-income housing tax credit has financed about 3,000 units in Palm Beach County since its inception in it really started to go into, it was part of the tax reform in 1985, but really started to be used as a production vehicle in the early 90s. We won't talk about the market right now. The market goes up, the market goes down. The primary buyers are banks and institutional investors, large corporations who are looking for an offset on their corporate income taxes. Next slide. So another vehicle is issuing bonds. You heard reference, Suzanne made reference to a bond issue. That would be a municipal bond issue to create a fund for affordable housing. Individual developments can receive an issuance of tax-exempt bonds from the local Palm Beach County Housing Finance Authority or from Florida Housing Finance Corporation. And those bonds generally allow for a longer mortgage term, lower interest rates, and an automatic allocation of a 4% housing tax credit. So it's not as competitive, although recently changes in the tax code have made the 4% credit more lucrative. So combining it with bonds has led to a run on tax-exempt bond authority, and the amount of bonds that can be issued by state and county agencies is limited. So we're seeing more demand for that now. And this financing vehicle has financed about 7,000 units in the county. Now, there are numerous other sources. I'm not going to use the acronym. Armando covered them. The one you're, of course, most familiar with among major bulk affordable housing production resources and neighborhood stabilization program funds, which Joan administered masterfully here in Lake Worth. What a great success. And people all around the state of Florida talk about the success story that is Lake Worth. We're definitely proud to be a small part of that. So we'll go to the next slide. And I'm not going to overwhelm you with slides because I'm the last speaker. But what I want to do is make an appeal to you for partnership. People who develop affordable housing, we believe in doing good and doing well. And so what I want to do is appeal to you as what we like to think of ourselves as community builders. Yes, we're in it for profit. But I think we're in it also for three things. One is that we want to create a dynamic community at scale. We want a true all of us genuinely want a true partnership with our friends in the public sector and with community and neighborhood associations as well. Affordable housing can be controversial. You've heard everyone talk about the challenges of persuading neighborhoods and communities that affordable housing is not a threat to their property values, a threat to their public safety, a threat to their way of life. And every time you see a new affordable housing development, especially in this modern paradigm that's been developed over the last 5 or 10 years, our success is making it indistinguishable from other market rate products. You probably would be surprised if you drove by some of the developments in Palm Beach County or throughout. And we were able to point out each development, that's affordable housing, that's affordable housing. Because our goal is to make them community. Our goal is to build consensus with community, neighborhood associations, and the public. And our goal is to have a partnership with the public sector. What does that partnership mean? Okay, it means first that there should be a reasonable paradigm for providing incentives. The city of Lake Worth Beach has come a long way through, density bonuses and other programs in incentivizing development, particularly for affordable housing. What that leads to is a dynamic dialogue between private sector developer and local government and neighborhood leaders on things that what I call kind of trade-offs. For example, we're doing a development, an affordable housing community called Berkeley Landing right now. And we're working with the city of Riviera Beach and their community redevelopment agency. The city feels strongly about civic open spaces and public plazas where people can gather and have constructive open spaces, where you feel like you're in a community that values art and passive space. In exchange for creating those open spaces, they've agreed to allow us to reduce the amount of parking spaces. And in a lot of times, prescriptive land use and zoning development codes say you have to provide this, and you have to provide that, and you have to provide this setback. And it's better for the community if we work together and there's a dynamic process where we can do things that benefit the community, like civic open spaces, landscaped with sculptures and benches where people can feel like a part of the community, in exchange for things that may not get used as much. And in affordable housing, our parking demand can be from 0.7 spaces for senior housing to maybe as much as 1.5 spaces for family affordable housing. A lot of codes are 2 spaces per unit. Take it or leave it. Or if you want to go to a magistrate, argue it with them. I would argue that less prescriptive development regulations and the more dynamic development process, even if you hold our feet to the fire as citizens and elected officials and demand a high quality of development, that's better for guys like Jeff and me than a prescriptive adversarial, we follow the code kind of relationship. It's a win-win for everybody. So, but the other thing that I would tell you is that I talked about specific incentives, parking reductions, density bonuses, negotiated development trade-offs. The thing that we all like is processes. We like to know that when we enter a process, we know what the process is and what the result is. And in our experience, I've worked a lot with the city of Hollywood and Fort Lauderdale and other communities down in Broward County. I've been personally responsible for about 3,000 of our 10,000 units of Pinnacle. I enjoy the communities. Many of the local government jurisdictions mandate for us because I get great ideas for our developments. I learn things, and we help to scale and program the developments we do and create a winning strategy for affordable housing instead of the adversarial NIMBY strategy that in the past has proved to be for those of us in the industry and for cities as well. So I would encourage you to explore P3 opportunities, to look for, surplus sites that would be great for affordable housing, to take advantage of P3 partnerships, to look at things like form-based zoning, where the code really allows it isn't as prescriptive, and it allows the commission to work with staff and the community and negotiate a high quality dynamic development. Last slide. So some final thoughts. I think, I think I've kind of touched on all of this. Money matters, money drives, cost drives, but the actual form and shape developments take is a process that begins with each of you and working together with people like me and holding our feet to the fire. You're going to be focused as Lake Worth Beach's future is urban and infill, and looking at sites and reimagining whether they're an old Winn-Dixie or a failed shopping plaza or some other kind of use, maybe a use that needs to be remediated because of environmental problems. We do that all the time. We'll take sites and we'll create brownfield designations, clean them up and make them safe, and then convert them into affordable housing. And, I'm not going to go through all of these. I do think that context-sensitive development should be encouraged. I think the 2 reasons why I will tell you I think that's really important is, 1, a context-sensitive dynamic process leads to a better product. And two, that process, we have seen it countless times. Affordable housing oftentimes is the first deal in a distressed community, a new dynamic affordable housing community. First deal in. It leads to more investment, and more investment. What's interesting is when our company was founded in 1997, we did our first development called Pinnacle View. And it was in an area where no one had built any new housing in 15 years. And everyone said, why are you building over there? So it's an opportunity to do affordable housing. We had figured out that we would be able to finance a multi-story development with a parking garage when other people shied away from that affordable housing. But we picked a site that had an infill component, and we also renovated an old house and built that in 2000, and it was finished in 2000. And 2021, Wynwood is one of the most popular growing neighborhoods. And explain, we change our mural to fit, our parking garage to fit whatever's going on. It was for COVID, and then the Miami Heat in the NBA Finals, and then the Miami Heat players wearing masks to tell everyone to mask up. So we've tried to create a dynamic environment that fit the community as it's grown in Wynwood Arts District. The last thing I'll say is the sculpture you see upper right in Tallahassee, I did a development where we were developing on pioneer family land in the French community in Tallahassee, which was a huge African-American middle-class jazz community. Ray Charles lived there. Cannonball Adderley came from there. The gentleman whose house we renovated and we built a replica of his family home as our leasing office, and then built a 5-story, 88-unit affordable housing. He was a clarinet player and an auto. And his daughter integrated in the young school. So having a chance, I would encourage you, bring a sense of history and fun to affordable housing, because it is. It's great to see people live in homes and be able to raise their children in a safe, clean, and quality environment with all the things that matter: Energy Star appliances, solid surface floors, controlled access entry, more condensed urban. So the last thing I mentioned, because I saw it on my little list, is I needed to talk about the relationship between rental and home ownership. And all affordable housing finance developments here in Florida have certain obligations that the state imposes on us to educate our residents, whether it be financial management, home buyer education, helping to cope with growing their families, particularly on the family side. And the thing that we do, and a lot of other people in our industry do, but we have spent, since our company's inception, over $1 million rebating rent for down payment assistance. We give back 5% of our rent after a 2-year vesting period. We live in our developments for 2 years or longer. We rebate 5% of your rent for a first-time home buyer. So if someone wanted to move into a home that the land trust is doing, they have an opportunity to get it up for good with us. So what we do is cultivate homeowners. And we want people to invest and cycle through our developments to look for a healthy.
Is that retroactive?
Do you live in one of our?
Does it go back to the beginning, or does it go?
It goes
2
back.
years on?
No, it goes.
Retroactive back to the 2 years.
It goes retroactive. So if I do give me notice you're moving out, and you say you've lived in our development since 2018, we write you a check for 5% of the rent you paid from 2018 to your move out date, right to your fund. So I want to thank you.
By the way, Tim Cannonball taught at Dillard High School.
What's that?
Cannonball Adderley taught at Dillard High School.
I did not know that.
Band director of Dillard High School. 1948 to 1950.
I did not. Thank you.
Okay, we'll do the history lesson. No.
It's up to you. I'm happy to since I'm up here. And we'll answer questions, but I know how to find all these people. So if you have more questions after tonight, or if you think of something later, just let us know. And you definitely pop your hand.
When you ask a question, please say your name. When you ask, because we all get to know each other. Okay. All right. I'm Diane Spokman. I live on 381 my question is to you, Ken. What is Pinnacle House? Is it a development company, a management company?
Yeah, we get confused with a lot of, there's a big Pinnacle management company. We're a Miami-based development company. Yes,
Development.
yes.
So
We are not a management company. We have a property management company we use in all of our developments, but we do not own it.
I have a question
Sure.
to you, Tim. One of the things about Lake Worth is we're small and we don't have a lot of open space.
Mhm.
So my question to you is, if Lake Worth, what's the smallest piece of land that you can work with?
Ooh, that depends on it depends on height limitations too. And it depends on construction costs at the time and certainly on the value of the land we could pay. I can tell you that the smallest that we worked on, even building, say in Miami,
Right.
and going multi-stories, is about an acre. But we've done other developments that are maybe 2 acres and then some that are 3. It depends, whether we have to build a structured parking garage. Our developments, the economy of scale for production building of affordable housing with housing tax credits, the sweet spot is usually about 78 units or more. And that's where your income and your expenses trend over time, where they don't do this. You want them to kind of like this, or sorry. You want to perform over a period of time. So.
And I'm going to give the commission, unless you're okay. All right. Okay, Alan.
Hi, Tim, and I want to thank you. I haven't been in this industry since 1976, and one time director of development in Palm Beach County. I can just say to you all, on the investor side, I buy tax credits that he produced. Out there, we're actually putting money down, 20 million. There it is. I can say to you all, this is based on 46 years in this industry, in Palm Beach County, rising from planning tech, Little Bimbo, to the director of MCD, and Jim worked for me at one time. Best of the best, he really was and still is, in my opinion. It takes money, people, and anywhere. The first presentation I gave to Palm Beach County Board of County Commissioners, 1984, you want affordable housing? You need to put money. You want to rebuild the lakes, Bellway, South Bay, Pahokee? It takes one word, and they did. 3 years, they put $5 million a year out of their general fund. 10 million over 2 years. But since then, Palm Beach County has done diddly squat, if anything, other than what they get from the federal government and from the state. So we really need this county, make affordable housing work. We've got nothing with 46 years of experience here, right from the Bimbo up to whatever else I am. Money. So you need to lobby your legislators, you need to lobby your county commissioners to pass a bond issue, $50 million. So this company and other companies like that could build affordable rent housing. We're in a crisis that I have not seen in my 46 years in this industry. But think about it. We talk to your politicians, your friends, commissioners, state legislators, federal legislators. Money. Sound like he's talking to me and that's what we say.
And we did say we're going to work on a $200 million bond issue to bring to the commission in March of 2022. So I'll be calling on all of you first. Oh, no, it's for the whole county. I mean, if people get the gap financing, if they can develop, if Matt gets some money from that, Cindy, we make it better for everybody, and that's just catch-up money. 50, we got to catch up before we can even start addressing the problem. So 50 million, it's much too little now. We need a lot more.
We need a lot more. That's the case of start.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't hear you guys, no one mentioned is opportunity zones, which we have a spot in the city of opportunity zones. And being somebody going to the dais for 120 days, I've already learned that the challenge is making sure we have affordable homes and that we donate and we put our skin in the game without having the residents cut our heads off. Because there's a balance of, well, the city keeps giving and giving and giving to developers, but we need housing, and you're telling us we need to give and give, but we have 38,000 residents and 60% of them say, you're giving the house away. So how do we, and I guess I'm asking the whole board, how do we find a balance of making that obligation and putting our skin in the game without making, 60% of our residents think that we're giving the land that we have away just to develop?
Or giving our money, our resources away to people that aren't exactly what we want to invest.
Or don't design exactly what we want them to design. So I mean, we're in a contentious point in this little city.
I want to add one little thing there too, the difference maybe between giving these incentives away to the market rate developers versus giving these incentives away to people who are already building affordable housing. Giving them away to everybody, how do we attract the affordable housing component? So that's a big loaded question. These are the things that we're grappling with.
Well, I think you need to make that policy decision. You need to target what type of housing you're looking for. The market's going to create its own housing. You don't need to incentivize the market rate at this point. One of the ways I think that's a little more palatable to citizens is using your taxes. So using your property taxes as the incentive, whether it's a tax rebate or tax increment financing opportunity, because that's money that's not there now. It's only there if the property's developed. So it's not like you're giving away existing funds. Opportunity zones were actually the property that I showed you that was a shipping container that's still kind of up in the air. That's actually in an opportunity zone, and Valley National Bank is creating a opportunity zone fund to be able to then provide for the investment and capital for that project. So it's a little tricky on opportunity zones because now we're 3 years into an opportunity zone. So the tax benefit is not as great as it was in the beginning. And the more time goes on, the less the tax benefit. But it's a tool. It's one tool in the toolbox, but.
We have a very big chunk of an opportunity zone that hasn't been taken out.
It's tricky with housing, but we'll talk. I mean, I think partnerships are the way to go, and really talking about what you need. And you do have some good developers here that will try to help you work through that. And I can't say enough about designing something that makes sense for the property instead of trying to stuff everything into existing codes. That's one of the things we're really going to talk about the housing plan, is how to do this and have it make sense. So,
hand up for a while.
Yep, here, and then I don't know who's first, here and then over here.
Graves McConnell, 24 South Street. I think this is a wonderful put together. Well, where's the housing authority? And where is information on Section 8? All the things you're talking about are either been done or there are things in the future. We need to know right now what's available for our citizens. And if those entities were here, we could find out what their situations are and what they're doing to help people who can't afford any housing get them. There's no representation up here.
We can tell you there is waiting lists for vouchers. There aren't enough.
You don't work for the housing authority, no disrespect, I'd like to hear from their people. They're the ones that know day in and day out.
Yeah.
My other question is about your land use situation, which didn't make any sense to me. If you're charging someone, if you change the value of the house from $220,000 to $130,000 by your formula, but then you're turning around and charging that over 12.5% interest, and right now the market is 1 point something or under 2%. Then they pay for how long? They never gain ownership of that house?
I'll just clarify, we're not charging them interest. that's how much they're gaining on the value of the house. How much they're getting for the value of that house at resale is based on that resale price.
Who's mortgaging the house, you or a bank?
A bank. So they're getting the traditional rates of 3.75. So they're getting a regular mortgage. The difference is that they never own the land. They're leasing exclusive use of it permanently, but they are giving up a share of the resale price. So instead of that homeowner who bought a house for 130, making 440,000 on it when they sell it, because they bought it below market, they're getting a below market return. So they're walking away with 40-something thousand in that example.
So it remains affordable.
So they buy houses $130,000 in the base market.
It's 220,000.
It's going to be under what, and is that market value or is that property appraiser value for that land?
220 is the market value. The 130 is a sales price that we came up with that said this is affordable to an 80% home buyer who's probably making $45,000, $50,000. This is what's going to be affordable to them. So that way they're able to enter the home ownership market versus just renting, build up some equity, and they can decide to stay in there forever. They can pass it on to their heirs, or they can sell it and move on, to more market rate housing.
So Ramsey, basically only for the mortgage, it's not insurance, and it's not for tax, correct?
Well,
Those are additional expenditures.
Right, when we set the sales price, we take all that into account, and that's why the sale price was 130, because we said, okay, in a couple years, interest rates are gonna go up. So in setting the sale price, we use like a 7% interest. We're not charging them that. That's just what we use to come up with the affordable price. We say, okay, their insurance is gonna be this, their taxes will be this, so we back into 30% of their income, and that's what we set the sale price for.
Because Ramsey, at the very outset, they got in this example, a $220,000 home for $130,000.
I understand that. And I understand what you're doing is you're allowing that person to stay there at reduced cost, but if things change, it's insurance.
But everybody's got that.
And you can get insured property taxes. So I believe there's a way that person, even though you get it in at a lower value rate, market rate for the house, they still could end up in a situation where they're out of the house because of increased insurance costs and increases in property taxes and or bonds that they have to pay on their expenditures. So I can see where I like the formula, but I don't see the flexibility of where's another resource for those, if they're hit with those income expenditures, or let's say medical emergency, or some other expenditure that takes out the bottom line budgeted money to afford the house. They slip into a situation where they can't even afford a house that's under the market value.
Right, and I think one of the benefits of our type of homeownership is the stewardship services that we provide. Because we're in it for them in perpetuity, we own the land, we lease it to them. We're there to make sure that if they get in any trouble, that we provide resources. Like we've had people lose their job. We got them with the hardest hit program. During COVID, we've got our homeowners and the mortgage assistance program, the utility assistance program. We got resources to help our people with food, with utility assistance. So we're always there. In other cases, we help budget. We always have the right of first refusal. So if there's a situation where they have to move away, we can buy the house back, or we can get them another income eligible buyer to take them out immediately. So, there's still some risk, but I will say they also get homestead exemption. So they benefit from that with the property appraisers where they're only going to go up, it's like 3% a year.
So you perpetually own the land that the house sits on,
Forever.
Sits on. And then are you involved with any repairs if there's damages in the repeat and stuff like that, or again, that falls on their responsibility?
I think, we'll have, why don't you check
Yeah.
with Cindy on this, because I want to make sure we cover some other areas.
That's true. My one other last question is, in all of these gatherings, and even in your slides, you're lumping affordable housing and workforce housing. And I've yet to see anyone give a distinctive clear definition of what the difference is between affordable housing and what the difference is between workforce housing. And even though you have a developer out in Lake Worth unincorporated building, but then you got a piece of land in West Palm Beach instead of having coming into Lake Worth proper to build whatever that housing identifier is. So who can give me a succinct definition of one from the other place?
Ramsey, why don't you have a conversation?
It's the whole panel, someone out there.
I can tell you,
No, we
I can tell you the
but
city.
We're just trying to get everybody.
I can tell you the city of West Palm Beach is 60% and below AMI is affordable housing. Above that is workforce housing. 120%
Same with the
AMI.
county.
That's
So
the same with the
workforce
county.
housing is based on the income of the median income of the county. Yeah.
Workforce housing is based on the area median income.
I'm sorry,
The area median income,
is workforce housing.
yes.
Well, it depends. 60% and below is affordable, but above that, you consider it workforce, but those are just terms.
Right.
We want to make housing that people can afford, and that's the bottom
When
line.
you lump two different terms, and please understand.
Well, it's a funny, let me move over here, because this gentleman has had his hand up a long time.
I wanted to see if this is probably specifically the project Berkeley Landing that was done in Riviera Beach, and then housing projects that are on West Palm Beach. Can you talk briefly about the local government area of opportunity and how the local governments have been able to help deliver 9% tax credits? Well, that's a good question. The local government area of opportunity, which I will not call it LGAO because I'm staying away from acronyms. It's a local contribution by a municipality or county to a development where that gives it a ranking preference when competing for those housing tax credits to Florida housing. So in the case of Berkeley Landing, which is, we were awarded in the last cycle and for 9% housing credits in 2020. The city of Riviera Beach made that local government area of opportunity commitment and chose Berkeley Landing over other developments in the community that also sought that resource. So they agreed to make a low interest permanent loan at the amount required by Florida Housing, which in last year's application cycle was $640,000. So it's an important tool, and it's Florida Housing claims are going to look at whether or not they want to tweak it, but they've made it sort of the predominant sort of ranking classification to try to get away from breaking ties to funding developments via a lottery system. They're trying to make it the predominant way to show that local governments have skin in the game and really want a particular development. So it's a great tool. And it also, going back to my earlier remarks, it makes the developer sell the development to the local community up front. You know, we can't just assume that we're going to get commission support, you know, without doing a good job of articulating our vision for the development. So it's good. It's created this other step in the process that I think is helpful in building community support.
And the city's provided, you know, a couple of examples I showed up there. We had that local contribution. The county puts out a request for qualification.
Yeah, they have one out now.
Every year as well to do that contribution to the county.
Just want to clarify for the commission's benefit. With regard to that, the county comes out with a countywide. And really, in order to get a 9% tax credit, which is a, you know, almost like a for a project, you now, like, given the current draft of this year, it's going to be that's some have to have this designation for local government. So the county's going to pick one countywide project, and then each of the cities can pick their own project, but any government entity can choose one project.
I don't know.
And out of those projects, one is going to be selected.
Why don't we know what's your name?
Dan West.
Okay, yes.
Sorry, I did not say that. Dan West, the other world. So the city was able to provide that funding.
Yeah, it's only for entitlements though, so Lake Worth Beach would not qualify at this point in time. You have to have 50,000 more residents and then decide you want to be an entitlement. So it's going, you know, I won't get into it, but Commissioner McCoy, I've seen your.
My question is for Tim, I think. You mentioned at one point in one of your slides that having, I guess, the form-based zoning where there are some density benefits, they are benefits, various benefits for area ratio benefits.
Yeah, right. Thanks. See,
we're learning.
I'm rubbing off.
Yeah, exactly.
In a good way.
And that's helpful for encouraging the affordable housing.
Yes.
I think I probably can speak for all of our commission that at least since we all showed up in March, we have apparently a very unusually good program of form-based things that William Waters has put together back in 2008, 2009. When we really needed for development. What is difficult for us,
and I'd like your insight on it, is everything that we've seen and every development, there's been a whole string of them that all were enthusiastically using TDRs or sustainability development benefits or all the different methods to make it easier. None of them wanted to do anything even vaguely like affordable housing or workforce housing. It was all market rate. So we're as a commission sitting there with this spectacular incentive program, all going to stuff that's not helping the problem.
Well, that's just, that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We just passed the first reading of an ordinance, but you only get the TDR or you only get the FAR bonus if you do X percentage of workforce or affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's the only way you get it.
What I'm hearing is we have a great program. The missing element is that we do not restrict the accessibility of that program to affordable housing.
Or at least a percentage of it.
And you also might, and I was going to say that, some of those incentives, like Palm Beach County's incentives, are tied to production of a certain amount of workforce housing units, or in exchange for contributing to a fund or contributing actual capital dollars to an actual workforce or affordable housing development. So, so that's something you might want to consider in terms of, reimagining or evolving your regulations. Yeah.
So the tool is there. We just haven't restricted where you can to incentivize the right thing.
Right.
Question for you: do you, in your experience, and I guess this would be well for any of you, but particularly, how well have you found it to work at the bigger scale, not economically and so on, but when you integrate into a given building multiple, some folks are at market rate, some folks are at affordable. Any experience with that?
That's yes. We've done quite a few of those. We always, and nowadays, try to do at least some market rate units in all of our developments. And the experience is pretty good. We may be, in New York City, they started doing that a lot. And then developers, then they started, what they call the pour door. Here we have a separate door for the affordable people and the concierge lobby, the whole 9 yards. Now, okay, we do not like. All right, I mentioned our development on Brickell called Brickell View Terrace. Yes, our luxury market rate residents are on the upper floors, but we have shared amenities, a shared lobby, and the integration between people at different income stratifications is not posed to a challenge. What's that?
It seems to work fine.
Yeah, it seems to work fine. Yeah, I don't think there's any tension between people. Most people are really not, analyzing who makes what. I will say that, there are some, we at Pinnacle at Tarpon River, which our development in downtown Fort Lauderdale, we have 12 market rate units, including in the 12-story building, we embedded 4 townhouses. And, some people drive some fancy cars, but, and maybe I wonder when I pull in the parking lot and I see a BMW, how do other people react to that? But I've never gotten any sense of that. That's been an issue.
That's very helpful. I appreciate you sharing.
And when we talk about workforce housing, we're talking about teachers.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
Police officers, we're not.
Sometimes teachers are in the low income category. They're starting to.
Childcare workers, don't make much, but they definitely are workforce.
DCF workers.
Oh, there's retail.
I just want to ask one question. I know we're out of time, but I'm just curious. That's like what happens to these projects after 50 years. So the land trust, it seems like you've had that experience of, your one-time benefit and you've adjusted for that. So because when we're looking at our city, we are 7 square miles, like everybody says, we're small. We don't have a lot of room to continue adding more and more projects. So once we kind of build up density in some of these areas, like we're done. But for the most part, when it starts tearing stuff down. So like in 50 years from now, when all these affordable housing and workforce housing go back onto the markets, then what?
Question. Well, early in the program, Florida Housing extended out to 50 years. affordability covenant. The federal tax code only requires 30 years. And there is an opt-out period at year 15, an early opt-out period, where you can market it. And some people can exercise a right of first refusal to buy it as affordable, and then that owner could have converted. Now that can happen now in Florida. A few developments, because I'm trying to answer your question by saying what happened in, the mid 2000s when some of these developments opted out at year 15. And what happened was a few of them converted to market rate or condominiums. Others of them stayed in the program. A lot of times tax exempt bonds are used as a vehicle to refinance them and to recharge them a second time. And Florida Housing is working on some policies now to try to incentivize people when they get to year 50 to refinance using tax exempt bonds and the 4% housing tax credit to substantially renovate and then keep them as affordable for another 50-year cycle, which I plan to be cryogenically frozen and be around.
One thing Pinellas County does with their sales tax infrastructure money, they do penny for Pinellas, where the city will provide money for a developer to acquire land, but they lease the land to, the land is leased from the city to the land trust, who then leases it to the developer so that it has permanent affordability requirements. But they have a substantial source that, their sales tax infrastructure money to be able to do that. But that way it ensures a permanent affordability regime.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, well, I think we're gonna have to wrap it up here, but I think some of us can stay around. Some people have to get going if you have any more questions, and we will tell you how to find everybody. And definitely feel free to talk to your commission about this and tell them what you think, and we'll just be resources for you.
Wish you Godspeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank everybody that came.
Ella.